In TRACE 1.2.2, the 2012 version of the Chicago classification is fully implemented. This version can be recognised by the yellow-green background in the main menu. To use the Chicago classification, you will also need to have the low-range colours with contours colour scheme installed and the Chicago classifications entered into the report defaults. Note that for anorectal manometry, TRACE 1.2.1 must be used, as anorectal manometry reporting is not supported in TRACE 1.2.2. TRACE 1.2.2 will also work without using the Chicago classification. You can continue to enter your own list of classifications and diagnoses and measure nadir pressures using the main analysis screen. Calibration and recording functions are unchanged. However, to support the Chicago classification, alterations have been made in the analysis and reporting screens. Access the analysis screen by clicking on Analyze Manometric Data. Select a study and the analysis screen will open as shown. The function of this screen is mostly similar to previous versions. In particular, the controls and displays, along with the measurement of basal sphincter pressure, are unchanged, with all of the changes in this screen relating to the classification of individual swallows. The Chicago classification measurements are displayed in the bottom left-hand corner in tan-coloured boxes. These include the IRP, DCI, distal latency, contraction front velocity, number of breaks greater than 2 and 5 centimetres, the integrity of the contraction, contraction pattern, and IBP pattern. Make sure that the low-range colour scheme with contours is selected to show the 20 mm mercury contour in black and the 30 mm of mercury contour in white. The screen to generate the Chicago classification measurements is accessed through the button labelled Chicago Classification. Press this button to bring up the classification screen. In this screen, the graph below the topography plot represents the LOS pressure, or the highest pressure between the horizontal above LES and below LES cursors. The graph to the right represents the maximum contractile pressure along the esophagus, or the highest pressure between the vertical swallow and end analysis cursors. You'll need to adjust a couple of points. Move the vertical cursor marked swallow to the beginning of the upper sphincter relaxation. Move the horizontal cursor labelled below UES to a point below the upper esophageal sphincter. Move the horizontal cursor labelled above LES to a position just above the lower esophageal sphincter. Move the horizontal cursor labelled below LES to a point below the lower esophageal sphincter. The vertical cursor marked end analysis should be moved to the end of the swallow. The crosshairs marked proximal limit should be moved to the earliest part of the 30 mm of mercury contour at the proximal end of the smooth muscle esophageal contraction. The point marked CDP should be moved to the junction of the tangents between the 30 mm of mercury contraction front and the slower contraction of the phrenic ampulla. An example of cursor placement is shown here. The measurements to be made are: IRP will be calculated from the box defined by the vertical cursors swallow and end analysis and the horizontal cursors above LES and below LES. DCI will be calculated from the area bounded by the vertical and horizontal components of the proximal limit crosshairs, the vertical end analysis cursor, and the horizontal above LES cursor. Contraction front velocity will be calculated between the crosshairs of the proximal limit cursor and the CDP point. Distal latency will be calculated as the time between the swallow vertical cursor and the CDP point. Large and small breaks will be calculated from the maximal amplitudes between the vertical swallow and end analysis cursors in the x-axis and between the below UES and above LES cursors in the y-axis. Breaks will be indicated in the bar immediately to the right of the pressure topography graph as red areas. Black areas are intact contraction and green areas are outside the area of analysis. The swallow will be automatically classified in terms of the integrity of the contraction, contraction pattern, and IBP pattern based on the Chicago criteria. If you wish to change these manually, click on the Automatically Estimating Classifications button and you will be able to then alter these manually using the pull-down menu. Definitions of each classification are shown on the right. If the cursors become lost, you can reset them to their default positions by clicking on Reset Cursors. To leave the screen, either click the red Exit Without Data button, in which case you will leave without the data that has been generated, or click on the green Accept Save Data button, in which case the data will be populated into the analysis screen. You will notice that when there is data to be saved, the Save Swallow button in the analysis screen begins to flash. Click on the Save Swallow button to save this data. Continue on and classify each of the swallows. The number of swallows currently saved will be updated in the Swallows Saved indicator on the right. If you need to modify any of the swallow data, click on Edit Summary. This screen allows you to modify the data on a saved swallow, and its function is very similar in principle to that of the same screen in previous versions. The differences are that you can review where you place the cursors and can repeat the Chicago classification analysis before saving any changes. Click on the Finished button to return to the analysis screen. As before, this screen can also be accessed via the main menu. When you are ready to generate the report, press on the Generate Report button in the analysis screen. Generating reports can also, as before, be accessed via the main menu screen. In this screen, the information related to the Chicago classification is located in the bottom left-hand corner. If the Chicago classification button has been used in the analysis screen, the button in the lower left-hand corner will read In Chicago Report Mode. However, this can be turned off if you do not wish to use those features in the reporting screen. To access the Chicago classification features, press on the View Chicago Data Summary button. This screen shows a summary of the Chicago classification data saved from the analysis. The 4 columns on the left summarize the metrics. The tables in the center summarize the classifications, and the buttons on the left show the Chicago classification algorithm as it applies to this study. The algorithmic diagnosis is shown in the top right-hand corner and in the pull-down menu. If you wish to see the data on a per swallow basis, click on Show Data Table in the top left-hand corner to see the data from each swallow individually. If you feel that the algorithmic diagnosis is incorrect, or you wish to explore the Chicago classification algorithm, you can click on the buttons to see the effect of modifying your data. If, for example, you felt that the number of weak peristaltic contractions with large defects was more significant than indicated in the numeric analysis, click on the button marked Weak Peristalsis with large defects more than 20% absent, and it will change to indicate that this parameter was abnormal. The algorithm will be updated and the diagnosis will change in the top right-hand corner. You can do this as many times as you like. When you are satisfied with your diagnosis, click on the Finished button to return to the Generate Manometry Report screen with the diagnosis now entered. The remainder of the screen is unchanged from before. Enter the indication, comments, referring doctor and classifications, save some swallows, and then click on Print and Exit to proceed to the report printing screen. In the report printing screen, the classifications for all swallows are summarised along with the Chicago classification data. You can modify the indication, comments, diagnosis and list of doctors, then print the report as in previous versions. If you do not wish to show the Chicago classification summary, return to the Generate Manometry report screen and deselect the In Chicago Report Mode button.